pills that were available, second all, two and all downers that were available at these places too. So it was drugs and alcohol. After about 4:30 in the morning, the after hours clubs kind of dwindled off and quit, and then there was a quiet period between 4 and 7 when people started to get up and go to work. So then day shift people came out about 7 o'clock in the morning. It was a different town then.
And you talked about all these illegal activities, and obviously you were there. Have you also, did you witness or experience also, you know, the music, the sort of some cultural expression? Can you tell me about that?
Well, I've always enjoyed black people. I love their music. I love their women. I fell in love with a black woman, married her. I have a son that's half and half. Sometimes I would just park my car at Williams and Russell, which was the Hollywood and Vine of the black district in those days. That's where a couple of nightclubs. Paul Knowles had another club besides the Cotton Club. It was right on Russell at Williams. It was called Paul's Paradise. It's a Paradise Club. And in the night they would stand out and talk and do the dozens, they call it, the dozens, where they talk about their mama. Your mama's so fat her picture falls off the wall. The kind of cultural stuff. I just enjoyed listening to them talking and talking loud and playing their music, and I just enjoyed the black people. I enjoyed the black culture so much. I got really involved in it. Got married.
And what was the demographic then, the racial fabric of Albina?
What do you mean?
Was that predominantly a black neighborhood?
Oh, totally black.
Can you tell me more?
Totally black. And the only white people that went over there were people looking for girls or drugs, and they were in danger. Now, Alberta Street was dangerous. It was just dangerous for a white person to be over there, so there weren't any. Now Williams Avenue is bike lanes and condos and coffee shops. Before it was drug places. It was just wild. It was dangerous. It was dangerous. That's all I can say. It was dangerous. It was dangerous for me. It was just dangerous for everybody.
And I read somewhere that another role of police officers, or I don't know if it actually was mainly you, was to kind of alleviate the poverty, the conditions of poverty. No?
No.
It was something about, I know what this is, Laura. It was in, I think, was something that you wrote about the Sunshine Division, the food boxes.
Yes. Well, when I worked uniform, we would often go to a house on a different call and find out they didn't have any groceries. So the Sunshine Division had at North Precinct, we had a closet with food in it. So if they needed something, we would go to the precinct, give them some food and bring it back and give it to them that way. That was what we could do. You know, we really couldn't do very much, but that's what we could do. So the Sunshine Division made that available to us. It was helpful.
And well, that's a good sequel to another question for you, because so that's how we met. So in those years you witnessed, or you obviously interacted with the Black Panthers. Tell me your side of the story.
Before they became the Black Panthers, before there was ever a Panther, they were hoodlums. What's his name? Remind me.
Ken Ford.
Kent Ford. He was a hoodlum. 4 or 5 of them were hoodlums. And what they did to support their breakfast program was extort people. And what I mean by that is I took the reports, so I know. 4 black guys would walk into the manager's office at McDonald's, which was then at the corner of Union and Fremont, and just tell the guy that we need so much money every week to support our program, and you better give it to us. So you can imagine you're a white person and 4 black guys walk in and start intimidating you. That's how they got their money. They went on up the street to the next business. Weimer's Hardware was another one I took reports from. They told them the same thing. You either give us money or there's going to be trouble. So that's how Kent Ford supported the program. I would have had a lot more respect for them had they done what white kids do, have a garage sale, have a car wash, have a bake sale. But no, they did what they always did. They were hoodlums and burglars and thieves. And then they became Panthers. Now they had a name, they had a purpose, but they were just crooks.
And
I know, now he's an old man, and so am I, and that's all history. But what it was, I was a tough cop and he was a crook.
that's
what
why
it was.
we're talking, right? Because it's an important piece of the story.
Yeah.
And what was your interaction back then? Like, did you arrest him by?
What's that?
What was your? I kind of remember you say you actually ended up arresting Ken Ford, or it's not?
Well, I arrested him a lot of times.
Tell me about that.
Well, it was usually for stealing cigarettes, or they would go to Fred Meyer and steal cigarettes and beer, and that was besides the burglaries they pulled, you know. But there was a lot of shoplifting. It's how they supported themselves.
Did
You buy that, steal beer and go sell it, steal cigarettes and go sell them. You know, their income was from theft.
Did you did you witness the free breakfast program?
No.
You never been inside?
Never went. No. If I did, I'd probably shut it down because it wasn't supported correctly, you know. And that play that we went to, I think it was somebody who said it was all free, and my immediate reaction was nothing is free. You know, I kept my mouth shut hard, but I kept my mouth shut. Nothing is free. How did you support it? You supported it by extorting money from businessmen.
How was to meet Ken Ford that day?
Interesting, because you know so much time has passed. Now he's an old man with a beard. I'm an old man. You know, we were kids. I was 25, and he was a juvenile, originally a juvenile. So he was under 21 for a long time when I was around. So they were crooks.
Do you what other?
The Panthers gave them a purpose. Now we can steal with a different name.
Is there anything? Is there anything? Any of their activities, not the stealing, like the activities that they supported with the stealing? Is there any of those? Were there any of these activities that you? First of all, why did they have a free breakfast program?
Well, I assume, I didn't know, but I assumed that the children weren't getting breakfast unless they went to school where they got some food at school. So I think that they saw a need and tried to do something about it, which was admirable. It's the way they went about it that was wrong.
And what about the clinics, the free clinics and the dental clinics? Did you go? Did you see it?
I'm sorry, I can't.
They had, they had several programs for their communities. They had a free clinic, a health clinic.
Yes.
And then a dental, like a free dental.
Yes.
Did you see this?
Never saw any of that because that all happened during the day, and I was home in bed during the day. For 6 years, I worked graveyard and slept during the day.
So you said you were 25 when you started.
Mm-hmm.
What was your idea of being a police officer when you started, and how did that change through all these difficult experiences?
Well, it didn't really change. I knew as soon as I got involved in police work in Albina, I could see the need for change. And I could also see that the people I work with weren't doing anything about it. So I always thought my job was to enforce the law. And the policemen that were working graveyard at that time, most of them had a full-time day shift job, and they viewed the police department as basically a place to sleep at night, so they could get enough rest to do their day job. There were two brothers that owned, worked at St. John's, slept all night, but they had an automobile parts store on Union Avenue, way out near Killingsworth. And one of them was a for my command who did countertops and that sort of thing during the day. So they all worked a day shift job. That was their job. The police department was just a part-time place to sleep. And so they would, one of my big difficulties at North Precinct was I was assigned to work with an older guy. Finished roll call, went to the wishing well. He had a cup of coffee with 2 shots of whiskey poured in it. After they drank the whiskey, we got a call, took care of the call, drove out. He drove out to the middle of Pier Park, way out. Pier Park is huge. So got behind some trees, got out of the police car, opened the trunk, got his blanket and pillow, and went into the back seat, went to sleep. The fool expected me to sit there and watch him sleep all night long. So when he got to sleep, I turned the siren on so that when he turned the ignition on, the siren would automatically go on. And I got out of the car and I walked back to the precinct. I told the sergeant, I'm not sleeping with this asshole out here. So I took the sergeant's keys off from his car, which was an unmarked car, and went out and went to work. And he didn't say anything about it, and nobody really said anything about it because they didn't want to work with me anyway, because I was keeping them awake. So I was the only cop, really, truthfully, the only cop that was awake at night enforcing the law. Everybody else was asleep. So they'd get rested up for their day job.
What we read that you talk about being a part of the new breed of police officer. Can you tell me that? What was the new breed?
Well, the new breed was a television show that came along about that time. And that's when they started hiring policemen because they were smart, not because they were big. Before, during the war, and after the war, in order to be a policeman, you just had to be big. Not very smart, but big. I remember the guys that walked to the beat in Skid Row. It was tough. They were big guys. Gene Keck, Ed Wallow. They were big guys, you know. And when they said Bud Lewis, who my wife met, big guys. When they said you're going to jail, there was no argument with them because they were bigger than you. So the new breed was the policemen that were college educated, who were there for a better purpose than just to sleep all night. They were there to enforce the law. That was me. I was one of the new breed. And I was proud of it.
I have one.
We are doing an
interview.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
Thank you.
I'm unlocking.
Thank you.
Good time. Do you want to get a sip of water?
Oh, I'm
Or
fine.
a piece of chocolate?
Yeah, I'll be so.
Thank you.
It's got nuts in
He's
it.
a good
just so you know.
storyteller.
Yeah.
I'm gonna eat a piece of chocolate. Not professional.
Yes. Why not?
Let me see in the meantime.
I had a lot of fun working the street. it's what I'm proud of. Spent 6 years as a street cop.
I wanted to ask you, Don, you know, you worked as a beat cop in Albina, right? You walked a beat, drove a beat.
Well, we didn't walk much.
Well, at night I was just thinking, I was like, yeah, you probably didn't walk much. But can you talk about that? What was that like to work that beat? And even if you could go into like what kinds of the sights were, maybe even what it smells like. Just one of the things that I really have enjoyed about doing research on you is your memory seems to be really clear about what it was like back then, and you tell these really great visual you paint good visual pictures. So if you could do that for us from what you remember about that time.
Well, King's Tavern. King's Tavern was a stinky place. You walked in, the bar was always crowded. They had a sandwich board where they make sandwiches. And one night I walked in, there was a cat sleeping on the sandwich board. Oh my God, you know, I called the health department, and the health department got and closed him down for a couple of days. So there was a Mexican guy by the name of Benny Villarreal who was a street heroin dealer. And one night I was in King's Tavern, and the place always smelled bad because they never swept the floor. Everybody was drunk. It was just alcohol fumes. I walked in the door, and Benny saw me, and he made a beeline to the bathroom. So I knew he was up to something. So I followed him in the bathroom, and he was putting balloons of heroin in his mouth that he'd been selling. I pushed him up against the wall, strangled him, so spit it out, I'm gonna strangle you. And he finally spit out 5 balloons of heroin. And I put him in jail. And he was dirty. He never took a bath. They were just terrible people. Man's Olympic room wasn't much better, but it was a little bit better. I mean, the girls danced on top of the piano to music. It was on a jukebox usually. And it was dark in there. But it also had a smell that was completely different. They never swept the floor. You know, there was just always cruddy, dirty. I was always happy to get out of there when I was always happy to go in and check things out. I was always happy to get out of there to get back to my nice clean police car.
I want to say one thing. So one thing that you might want to talk about, Dawn, is what made you angry about the prostituting of the black girls? Pam, Thelma.
Well, they were all kids. Thelma was 21 because she was able to dance. But the other girls were 18, 19 years old, and they were getting, their pimps were, Jano Lamouti was the name of one of them. He had a couple of girls, and he kept them addicted to heroin. And he'd send them out, you know, go out and do your, get me some money, honey. And they were just using them, you know, turning these 18, 19-year-old girls into heroin addicts. Really infuriated me. And I arrested the girls for being underage, you know, being drunk in a public place or being in a public place where they shouldn't be, not even allowed to be in there, 19 years old. So it was my way of getting even with the heroin people.
How is that you
One of the problems that I didn't know at the time was that so much of the heroin was being supplied by the police. Yeah. There was a police sergeant named Charlie Hill. He was Leroy Clark's business partner for 20 years at least, where he furnished heroin. Him and Chief of Police Ron Still. Ron Still ran a group of rogue narcotics officers. I call them Ron's Raiders. They killing people. They were robbing people. And the heroin that they got went to the black community. So they were furnishing heroin to the black community, and I was trying to get rid of heroin in the black community. So it was always this. I didn't realize it for a long time though that Charlie Hill was one of the heroin dealers and he was a cop. I didn't learn that for a lot of years later. I figured that out. When there was a shootout of Vans and I think it was 1977 or 78, and Leroy and Hill got into some kind of trouble. They got caught by the feds. And so the deal was that Hill wasn't going to take the beef. So Leroy was the one that was going to go to prison. And Leroy says, "There's no way I'm going to go to jail for you." So that's when he created this problem at Vans, and they went in to get him. He shut off all the lights, he took off all his clothes, and he was laying on the floor with a shotgun and a .38 pistol, waiting for them to come and get him. And the SWAT team was going to go in and get him. The FBI offered to send a negotiating team in, but they didn't want the FBI involved because their intention was not to save this poor black guy. Their intention was to kill him. So that's exactly what they did. They broke in the front door, and Leroy shot Hill with a shotgun. Hill had a vest on, and the shotgun was loaded with bird shot, which was basically ineffective. And he pulled out his .38 and he shot Hill, got him in the side right here, below the vest, just about 2 inches below the vest. So he actually shot him, wounded him. And at that time, the other guys in the SWAT team just boom, 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 boom. They just riddled him with gunshots and killed him. So that was the atmosphere. That was the corruption that was allowed by the mayor. Shrunk, basically Shrunk was a crook. One of the reasons that Terry Shrunk, one of the reasons that Mike Shrunk was the district attorney for so long was that he stayed there to keep the skeletons in the closet, That his dad had allowed it to go on for all these years. It was, I hope to hell that Portland and place are not as corrupt now as they were then, because I worked for two vice. Jack Sturgeon was corrupt. Carl Crisp was corrupt. They were both pimps. Jim Purcell Jr. was a crook. Two of my sergeants, one of whom later was Richard Walker, he later became a chief of police. Also, he was one of the sergeants that was a pimp. And I just hope there's not that level of corruption anymore, because it was really terrible. I'm surprised that Albina even survived, to become the nice place with nice streets and coffee shops it is now.
I was moved actually that you know the names of those girls. So, tell me a little bit about your relationship as a police officer working with young women in this situation. What was your...
Well, they didn't like me because, they knew they weren't supposed to be in there. I mean, when a 19-year-old goes into a bar and gets a drink, they know they're not supposed to be there. But before I came along, nobody cared. Pour the drinks, the more the merrier. Sit over in a corner, hustle the guys. So I was the nasty cop who tried to change all that. I didn't put up with that kind of stuff. It was simply against the law, and that was my job, was to enforce the law. I always wondered, why in the hell the guys that trained me didn't do anything. We'd go in advance and watch the girls dance and drink some coffee and go out and go back to work. Never did anything. They never checked. Obviously, there's people in here that shouldn't be here. There's people in here that are drunk that shouldn't be in here. There are underage people in here that shouldn't be in here. How come we never did anything about it? I never could understand that. But they just didn't do anything except answer the calls. And there used to be a lumber yard on Union Avenue about where Shaver is. And that's where they would hole up at night and sleep. Go back in a lumber yard and sleep.
Don, why don't you talk about what happened to Thelma and how she ended up? What she looked like when you first saw her?
Thelma was the one that was dancing on top of the piano. She was beautiful. Pasties, and in those days you had to have pasties. You couldn't be naked. And she was gorgeous. She was also addicted to heroin. During the couple of years that I worked there, I watched her deteriorate. And one night my partner and I got a call about a John that had been beaten up and ripped off. And he was in pretty bad shape. He got beat up. Took us to where he got beat up. And it was, Thelma's house. And we went in. She wouldn't open the door. So I broke the window and opened the door and went in. The place was a shambles. That's where the fight got. That's where they had been fighting. He'd been trying to get away from her. She was trying to get all his money. And so the place was a wreck. So I finally found her. She was hiding in the closet. And I pulled her out of the closet. I could hardly recognize her. She was a waif. She wasn't beautiful anymore. She was thin. She was a good example of what heroin will do in 2 years. No food, really. It just tore up my heart to see these young girls in that kind of situation. So many of them were just young girls, and the situation was so bad at home that rather than stay at home, they'd crawl out the window at night, go to their boyfriend's house, smoke pot and drink beer and relax, listen to some music, get away from that negative environment that they were in. That created this. Heroin was so prevalent. I mean, if you didn't do heroin, you weren't in, and once you got in, you were trapped. So heroin is a trap.
We read somewhere this really talking about strong visuals. This sentence that policing in Albina was like spitting against the wind.
It was.
Can you say that sentence?
Well, yeah. Speaking of trying to enforce the law in Albina was like spitting into the wind. It was. The cops were corrupt. My captain was corrupt. My sergeants were corrupt. The partners that I had been trained by weren't doing anything. They weren't necessarily corrupt. They just weren't doing anything.
Sorry to interrupt. When you're scratching the cup,
Okay.
it's kind of loud. I know, but sorry about that. Yeah.
So, what was the question?
That image of like policing Albina was like spitting
Yeah.
against the wind.
I was the breeze. I was the fresh air. I was the only one that enforced the law, which seems kind of ridiculous nowadays, doesn't it? There's one cop in the whole area that's enforcing the law. I thought it was ridiculous too.
Do you have any, because the environment seems so seems it was really difficult to be following the law and trying to protect the community and better the community while everybody around you
Yeah.
didn't care. Is there anything that you ended up having to do that you wish you didn't do?
No, I wish I'd have been done more of it. You know, I was threatened a couple of times by Captain Purcell. You know, if you don't leave our whorehouses alone, you're going to be whatever. And basically, I told him to go screw himself. You know, I stood up to him. I wasn't afraid of him, and maybe I should have been, because he was dangerous. But he did retaliate against me. He took me off the district and made me answer the telephone at the precinct. And he lived in Scappoose at that time. So when he came to work in the morning, he'd come across the St. John's Bridge and go to work at the precinct. So he had me directing traffic at the far end of the St. John's Bridge to facilitate his flow so he could get to work quicker. And I thought long and hard about killing him. I thought, well, the next time he comes, I'll stop the car. I'll get in the car. We'll go up the hill of ways to
Germantown
that park
Road.
that's up there,
Germantown Road.
Germantown Road, and he will commit suicide. And I'll walk back to the precinct and say that he never showed up. I was about ready to do it when he got sick, and he had to have an operation on his throat. Answer never survived. So probably lucky for him and me that he died a natural death. When he died, I volunteered to be a pallbearer and carry his casket. Everybody said, "We know you hated him. How come you want to be a pallbearer?" Because I wanted to carry the bastard to his grave.
Why don't you tell them about what happened after the woman was murdered in St. John's and you called for backup and no one came?
Well, there was a lot of that. I was the only one that was working, and they didn't want to work with me because I kept them awake at night. And so part of that retaliation was they didn't care what happened to me. So I was always on my own. For a long time, I worked by myself. So it was okay. I remember one night, I'm patrolling out in St. John's, and this woman you talking about this one? Woman comes running down the street, and she's naked, and she's screaming, "You're trying to kill me, you're trying to kill me." And so she was having clothes on, so I got her in the back seat of the car, and we had a blanket in the trunk, and I got her wrapped up in a blanket. She says, "You're trying to kill me, you're trying to kill me." She's pointing to the house she just ran out of. And I said, "You stay here in the car." I called for cover. Nobody ever showed up. So I went into the house, up the stairs. I could see the bathroom door open at the top of the stairs. I got to the top of the stairs. I pushed the bathroom door open with my gun, and here was this young girl. She was slumped down between the tub and the toilet. She'd been shot by this guy. Was her husband at the time, with a .30-30 rifle. Just destroyed her face. There was blood and bones running down the tile, and I can't help with that.
He called for backup and nobody showed up until he called for the detectives.
So I called, I had a murder on my hands, so I called for the detectives, and the detectives come and took it off my hands. I was grateful for the detectives, So, but that was the atmosphere. That's the penalty I paid for being the only cop awake and working. They didn't care what happened to me, so it was okay with me because I knew I depended on myself. And after a while, I did get a decent partner, Ray Jones, and we kicked ass in Albina.
Is there anything sort of positive that you remember of Albina?
No.
Can you say that sentence?
No.
The working people, the bakery.
What?
The working people in the bakery. The bakery.
I didn't see it. I didn't see the positive parts of Albina because I was asleep during the day. So now I'm happy that all that has gone away. It's a viable, respectable part of town now. White people are safe over there. White people are safe over here now.
I just want to acknowledge that we're almost at an hour, just to check in and see how you're feeling and stuff. We've probably just got a few questions to get through.
If you feel like,
If you're up to it.
is there anything? Let's see.
I have here. I just in your writing you mentioned about being at. I think that you were at that 1967. They call it the Irving Park riot.
Yes.
Do you remember being there, and what do you?
Oh yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Well, we didn't have riot gear in those days. We didn't have bulletproof vests. I had a shotgun and my .38, and I was posted on Union Avenue there at Fremont Street, which was right in front of the Black Panthers' house. They had a house there at that time, and the event started at Irving Park, which is just 4 or 5 blocks away from there, up Fremont Street, and then they started coming down. They were spitting at me, throwing rocks at me, throwing bottles at me. In those days, the rumor was that the hippies were going to start spraying the cops with oven spray. I said, anybody who sprays me with oven spray is going to get shot. I'll tell you that right now. So I wasn't in any particular danger. I mean, I was just there, and the riot went on out Union Avenue, and they were trying to start fires. Officer Steve Sims stopped a guy from throwing a Molotov cocktail at a furniture store out on Union Avenue. And the guy threw it anyway, and Sims shot him with a shotgun. Didn't kill him, but kept the place from being burned down. I don't even know what the riot was about.
I was just gonna ask you.
I don't know what it was about even. It was that was of course the 60s, so.
The 38 police officers that were hassling black people all the time.
No, I didn't see that. They weren't hassling black people. They weren't doing anything.
There were though, but you weren't part of that clique. They were there. They were doing it.
I never saw any of that. I never saw any of none of my partners ever beat anybody up. There was none of that. There was none of that when I was there.
Don wouldn't have seen that because he was on the outs of the guys that were on the end. He was unpopular.
Yeah, seems so. Seems like. On that note, maybe this is the last question. Who is Don DuPay?
Who is Don DuPay?
Who is it? Like,
Well, now he's an old man, and
can you say Don DuPay?
he's a writer. 2 of my books talk about the history of Albina. I think it's kind of interesting that a white guy has written about the history of Albina, but it's in both of my books, two of my books. I've just led a different kind of life. You know, I was a Navy spy. I was recruited by the CIA to go to work in Cyprus. But my wife, who I hadn't seen for 2 years, was pregnant when I got out of the Navy. And so I had to deal with that. And so that's the only reason I didn't take the job with the CIA. And so coming home, I should have divorced her, but didn't. That's a whole other story. But I became a policeman. And I always wanted to be a policeman. I loved being a policeman. It was I've always felt that I was, DuPay was born to be a cop. And so it was my forte. I was good at it. I was a really good detective. I worked burglary for 8 years. I put a lot of burglars in jail. I was in charge of the silent alarms. I installed silent alarms. I saved the Jacob Cam house when it was a derelict and waiting to get onto the National Register of Historic Places. I put an alarm in there and I caught 32 people in there with that alarm. If they were juveniles just in there looking for something to do, I'd arrest them for trespassing. But some of them were there to steal artifacts, you know, light fixtures and pieces of tile and stuff like that. I arrested them for burglary. So that's who DuPay is. He's an idealistic achiever. And I'm happy with myself. You know, I'm accomplished. I'm proud of the 3 books I've written. The 4th one will be out this year, which will be a hoot. For 6 years, I was the director of security at the Benson Hotel, and the place was a joke. It was a fire trap, and it was another place that I saved. When I went to work with Benson Hotel, there wasn't a smoke detector in the building. There was no fire suppression equipment in the building. Theft was rampant. But the place was going broke, you know, until I did some basic controls for risk management. So that's what that story's about. There's a lot of funny stuff in it about the crazy people that worked there. The problems I had with some of the staff members who thought they were, particularly the chef. They thought he
Xavier.
ran the place.
Xavier
Chefs
Bowser.
have a reputation for being assholes, and he was.
How did you, I mean, you witnessed and experienced a lot of terrible, traumatic things. How did you remain idealistic?
Well, I have a whole, if you're talking about things that I saw that I didn't want, PTSD, it's a whole list of things that I never wanted to see in the first place, and now I can't remember, can't forget them. Some of it still bothers me. The murder. So that's pretty tough.
The 1975 murder of Barbara Jean Carrico at the
Barbara Carrico, yeah.
Plaid Pantry.
I can't
That's why he
forget
left.
that. She was a clerk alone in a 7-Eleven store at 60th and Burnside. She was murdered, terribly raped. The murder of Ebony Manning, 16-year-old kid, killed by Ron Still and his cohorts for trying to get $2,000 worth of heroin he had stashed. That case still bothers me. I never did get any justice for him. Now Ron Still is dead. All of the guys that were involved in Ron's raiders are dead now.
Including the shooter, who we believe is the shooter, Scott Deppie. So.
Yeah, Deppie definitely was. Scott Deppie was one of the raiders. He was an absolute crook. He's the one who killed Deputy. Put a .22 rifle right in his forehead and pulled the trigger.
I imagine that at times you felt like giving up.
No, never did. Never felt like giving up. The reason that I left the police department was because I couldn't stand, not the police work, but I couldn't stand the corruption anymore. I mean, how much longer can I work for a police department where it's okay to murder people? You know, and I was always vocal about Ron Still, who was terrible. I called him out to his face, I called him everything but a white man, because I worked with him when he was a patrolman, I worked for him when I was a detective, and he was just always just a crook and a bully. And I just hope the police department isn't like that anymore. You know? I never gave up on police work. I'd still like to do cold cases if they'd hire me back. I was a good detective.
And you're a great storyteller.
You know?
Is there anything else? I mean,
I wanted to just ask you, if I was to get pulled over and, you know, by a police officer or someone was, just what's one piece of advice you would give people who are having to interact with a cop in
Well,
Portland?
don't argue, because the cop is always right. And if you disagree, then your day in court is available to you. But don't try and talk the cop out of it. Don't try and bribe him. Don't cuss him out. Don't make him mad, because he is in control of everything. He can put you in jail, tow your car, and one of the tricks that I used when I worked at North Precinct was, back in those days in the 60s, we didn't transport prisoners. The jail had a paddy wagon. They would always come out and get the prisoners. And so it was a long ways from downtown Portland City, where the city jail was, to North Precinct. So if I was irritated with you, or you screwed with me or something, I would put you in the cell at North Precinct and not call the wagon. And you sit there all night long until I decided to call the wagon and come and get you.
And you did
So-
that to people that were drunk sometimes.
Well, drunks and people that didn't agree with me, which was a mistake. Don't argue with the cop. You're gonna get yourself in trouble. Be nice. Give me your driver's license, your insurance, smile, and be lucky that's all you get.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.